Okay, so I would like to welcome Trish Hecker as my guest today. Let's see, Trish is the founder of Open Door Support, which is ODS, which was established as a resource for whole life sexual health education for parents, caregivers, educators, and health providers as they navigate questions and attitudes and experiences surrounding sexual health for the children in their care. As a mom of two teens, Trish is passionate about building confidence and self-advocacy for youth of all ages. She has a certificate in sexuality education and a master's in arts in social sciences with an emphasis in human development and educational studies. Using California Healthy Youth Act approved curriculum, okay, so it's an established curriculum, Open Door Support works in the classroom through parent workshops, one-on-one counseling, and customized training for teachers and healthcare professionals. Her organization offers compassionate education using honest, medically accurate, developmentally appropriate information. Okay, so that was a mouthful. Welcome.
Thank you, Jen. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Jen. I've been calling you Dr. Jen to everybody. Hey, I'm on Dr. Jen's podcast.
You know, I'm so happy that you are here because I've done a bunch of these lectures with smaller groups of typically women, and they inevitably ask, wow, what about sex ed? How do I talk to my kids about sex? You know, it's a natural part of this conversation that I think is on the minds, certainly of parents.
Yes, it is on the mind of parents. And then it sort of goes into the background because parents are so overwhelmed with everything else that they need to be doing. Is homework done? Is this done? Are we getting this done? Sports, all of that. And what I'm seeing is that those just real simple, small conversations are being lost and not done, right? So also we have to
avoided
and keep into consideration, there's a few things going on. First, the avoidance, which is sort of like the precursor, is the shame, is a possible trauma experience of their own that is keeping them from being able to have those conversations, right? And then we've got I don't even know what to say. It's like everybody forgot what it was like to go through puberty. Everybody forgot what it was like to, have their first sexual experience, or, so they don't know what exactly to say. They don't know when to start it. And that's sort of where I come in. You can start as soon as they are babies. You can start talking about consent in a way where you're explaining to your baby, I'm cleaning your vulva, I'm cleaning your penis. And then as they, I'm giving you to your dad, and you're just talking to them about, their body and where they are in the world. Right. So that builds that autonomy, that body autonomy. And then it also introduces, these vocabulary words that are just words. They're words for our bodies, and they should sort of roll off the tongue as easy as, heads, shoulders, knees, toes, vulva, all of that.
I mean, I find I'm shocked at how few adults use the proper names of things. And vulva is the most confusing word, right? I say vulva and I can see this little question mark pass over their face of wait, what's that? I thought it was a vagina. What, they don't know body parts. And so, having kids have words for it and not, sometimes nicknames, but actually being able to reference and understand their bodies from a very early age, I think is so useful.
Well, it's not only useful, it's actually critical to keep our kids safe. So, when kids don't know the name of their genitals or their, nicknames used, so that sort of introduces, well, why do we have different names, right? And so, because we should be embarrassed about it, right? And then, so that's sort of introducing shame without even knowing that you're doing that, right? But also the safety factor. If kids don't know the name of their genitals, they're not going to be able to tell their parents or trusted caregiver, somebody touched my vulva, or I'm feeling, they need to be able to use the proper words for what is happening to their bodies. So it is actually a very critical piece of, keeping our kids safe from sexual abuse. So, I hear a lot of parents say, I don't want to ruin their innocence. Well, my messaging is, if your child could be abused at any age, then we need to be able to communicate safety at any age. So it's just about, the appropriate language. Oftentimes parents and adults will sexualize these words where, vulva, penis, anus, these are not inherently like, we're not telling kids these words. So, and then their minds immediately go to like sex in a bed. That doesn't even enter their minds. We are sexualizing these words. These are just science words that we can tell kids, keeps them safe, helps them not develop shame around their bodies.
Sure. Yep. So, well, let's start. Okay. I want to just a quick call out to how did you even get into this space? And then I want to jump into the specifics. So tell us a little bit of your history.
Yeah, sure. So I've always, as a parent, as soon as my daughter was born, I actually suffered from perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. And I did some research on that and sort of unraveled it to my own trauma experiences. And so that happened sort of when my kids were sort of teenagers and well, not teenagers, like sort of like 10, 11. But as a parent, I've always been interested in keeping my kids safe. So we have always talked about, these types of conversations. I've always, talked about if, that masturbation is okay and all of these things. But so I was reading and seeing the statistics of child sexual abuse and also reading the mental health crisis going on with queer kids and the queer community. And this was happening around, 5 years ago, where it really came to a head for me, where, I had my own, I was in a career in hospitality and I was just kind of going along and it just sort of like all came together where I have to do something more. I can't just do random posts on my own personal media. I want to get this word out to parents. I want to help educate. So that was really it. Just one day, it just was like, I have to do something more. So I decided to go back to school because I knew I would need degrees in order to be able to do this work in education and, eventually mental health help. And so that's what I did. I left my job and I talked with my family and said, I'm going to go back to school. So I finished my bachelor's and then, we were in the middle of the pandemic. And again, I'm sort of I'm a researcher and I'm looking at what is the reality of this. So we see, folks talking about, grooming, and we're using these words incorrectly. And what that's doing is it's really actually moving the focus off of what is actually happening. And I do understand that this type of conversation is very difficult. So as an educator, I really had to dig deep and meet my anger and meet my frustration and think, okay, well, I just need to meet parents where they're at and help them understand this information in a way that is palatable and so that we can help kids together. So that's basically my story. And it's just, it's taken off. I am so grateful.
So, and it's so often these types of things or these types of careers, I would say, are informed by personal experience and by, of course, a desire to help, but you've got to have some research and some structure behind it that makes sense. And then you're trying to kind of carve a path so things look different and better.
Well, the reality is that everybody knows somebody that has had sexual trauma, whether it was as a child or as a teenager or as an adult. I mean, nobody gets out of life without it. It just is, it exists. And also we all know someone who is queer and has suffered and is, having a mental health crisis. And we know that is happening to teens, to teenagers. It's just the reality. And the less that we are able to really look at it in the face and face it together. And that's what I'm finding is like people love coming together for the workshops and for parent meetings, and they love the community.
Well, and I guess too, like the other piece of this, even in addition, just generally talking to your kids about sex and sexuality, just general, I mean, because I'm coming from the side of, Pleasure Project, and not so much from protection as it is enhancement, right? And so many of us, like I had really crummy sex ed. I had what was supposed to be a two-part 7th grade, 9th grade. Well, I moved in between those and they assumed I'd already had 7th grade sex ed. So I never got 9th grade, which was like all the real stuff. And so I was like 30 years old before I figured out the women have 3 holes. Like
Yeah.
I just like there's like basics that I missed.
Well,
And so I also feel like there's a charge around sex education.
Mhm.
There's incredible value, right?
Mhm.
Of course, protection is important, but also education so that we have information about our bodies and um about our right for pleasure and for desire and for relationship building and all the benefits. We want our kids to have a healthy sex life as well as a healthy relationship. So I think it's all entwined.
It is, and I think first and foremost, when I am teaching, I really focus on self-love and the relationship that we have with ourselves first and foremost, because that sort of sets us up with what is acceptable to me, who is acceptable for me to let into my boundaries, right? So unless we're, loving ourselves, understanding our bodies, understanding, what is pleasure for us, or also, we have to take into consideration that not everybody is going to want these relationships. Not everybody is going to move on to a sexual relationship. And I think, I don't think parents really understand what sex ed is. That's what I'm finding. They really do not understand. First of all, in California, the mandated sex ed is an opt-out experience. If you don't want your kid to have sex ed, which is the mandated sex ed, 7th grade through 12th grade, just opt your kid out. There's no penalty. It's like, that's fine. Teach your kids at home. But to deny other kids of life-saving, boundary focused, medically accurate, I do an anonymous question box in the classroom. And I actually had a question that said, can you produce out of your butthole? So a kid actually was asking if they did not understand.
Have a baby?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So
it's super basic. Yeah, it's basic.
That's basic.
And that curriculum is not promoting sex.
No, it's just giving factual information about, I'm going to give examples. So the school that I teach in is fantastic, and they do see the benefit of starting puberty education. So the law requires 7th through 12th, but as we know, any person that has been around, a middle schooler knows that they need this education far before 7th grade. We have kids that are starting their periods in 4th and 5th grade, right? We wet dreams start, that early, nocturnal emissions. So kids are like freaking out about that. So we start in 5th and 6th grade, right? And we talk about the social, emotional, cognitive, and physical changes that happen to ourselves when puberty happens, right? So we're not even talking about sex. We're just talking about what is happening to our bodies. We're validating, yeah, your mind is going to be foggy. We're validating feeling awkward, possibly in your body. Some people don't, right? So like introducing, and I hear a lot of teachers say, oh, we already do it. And they start the conversation with the kids is, this is going to be awkward. And I'm like, why are you saying that? You don't have
You're
to.
framing it in a way that's gonna,
Right. I say, this is exciting information for you all. I'm excited to give you this information about your bodies and about your minds. So it's just about a reframing of, this is an exciting time in your life, and I'm going to help you sort of understand what your body, mind, emotions are going through, right? To validate, you may or may not have a crush, both is fine, right? Giving basic information about menstruation. It's the fact that kids think that they're dying because they don't understand menstruation, like the fear and trauma that happens when that, a kid thinks that. So, and we talk about who do you like and what's like and what's love. And the goal is, I love myself, right? We talk about instances like if your friend asked you to steal money to go buy, out of your mom's purse to go buy candy, what would you do? And we do role play around boundaries and consent, but we don't even bring in, any conversation about sexual intercourse. We're skill building around, self-acceptance, self-love, boundary, consent, all of those things without even
Which
talking.
are basic skills that I wish more young adults had, right?
Right.
I, as a sex therapist, see young adults come in that are in college and they're navigating sexual relationships and they don't have that. They're having sex, but they don't know how to talk about it. They don't know what they want. They don't know how to say they don't want something. They don't know how to disrupt once they've started being sexually active and how to pull back on that. It's because it is skill building. It's getting, confidence and permission, and sometimes it seems strange, like as an older adult, like, yeah, you kind of feel as especially as a young woman that you kind of need that affirmation, you maybe need some permission. And so knowing that you get to make that choice about your body every single time feels obvious to me, but it doesn't feel obvious to them.
No, these kids, I'm just seeing how they're not being given agency over their lives and themselves. And so it doesn't relate to a sexual conversation later on, right? And I think conversations around consent it's as important to know how to say no as it is to accept a no, right? So there's a lot of focus on, well, how would you say no? How would you remove yourself from a situation? I had an anonymous question that said, what do I do if I say no and they don't stop? Right. And so we're needing to teach kids and adults how to receive a no without making it be this huge, oh, now I'm in the friend zone. What is wrong with the friend zone, right? That's kind of where a relationship should begin, if that's how you choose to, move forward with your, sexual relationships. And so as I was saying that, I was catching myself and I do, I am always still learning this, right? I want to validate everybody's decision, and that includes abstinence, right? And I love what you said. At any time, we can choose to be abstinent, right? You could be having all the sex in the world as an adult and then go, you know what? This is just not a right decision for me right now. Right. And so if we're teaching kids that early, that, you can have a crush and then decide, you know what, that's just not for me. We gender crushes so much, right? When we do that when they're little babies, oh, that's your little boyfriend, or do you have a little girlfriend yet? We've got baby clothes that say ladies' man. I mean, it's really incredible how sexualized our society is, but how shameful it is to talk about sex.
Yes. And that's part of the confusion that people feel, is that there's supposed to be these roles. And I would say, okay, on your point of receiving a no, I've got 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old men sitting in my office that are still struggling to hear no. And it's tricky within a relationship and what that does to their ego and how they, can hear their partner wanting something different or wanting it to be, it's because I see over and over, it's not that women dislike sex. They often dislike the sex they're having. And so being able to have conversations about that and skill building from an early age and being very conscientious and invested in the pleasure of both parties is learned. I mean, it seems like an empathetic skill, but it's also learned and has to be modeled and probably discussed, because otherwise it's just like you're two silos trying to kind of like do this thing. And there's all sorts of misinformation happening. So I love that you're having that conversation with them early.
Yeah, it's just so critical to have those conversations with kids as young as possible about, it's okay if you don't want to share, right? So again, not even talking about sex, we're talking about like how to have conversations about emotional connection, about physical connection that doesn't have anything to do with sex. Because if you can teach that early, like so-and-so doesn't want to share with you, right? So we're going to move forward with that person not sharing with you or not wanting to hold your hand, and then helping the kids process those emotions, right? Not letting one kid dominate or bully. So it is so much about the socialization, the emotional, processing of those things when they're kids, that sets up the skills later on for, oh, okay, well, that kind of hurt my feelings. Okay, well, I understand that, these are my needs. These are my needs. Let's see if we can find, a middle ground. Or, it's just the lack of being able to talk about our emotions, to talk about our needs, is, I think, what is really contributing to, violence, or just really people living just really unsatisfied, sad lives, right? And then that sort of leads to these, breakdowns of mental health and whatnot. So I think my message is like, okay, instead of trying to like fix all this stuff, or your 50, 60, 70-year-old men in your office, let's like do some preventative, skills and education really early. And so my question is, why don't people want this? And I really put that
I mean, it's
out
such
there.
a hot button right now, right? It's like, and I have friends that have been very adamant about not wanting their kids to get sex education. And I'm shocked because, why not? And I think part of it's the mistrust of the source. Maybe they haven't reviewed the curriculum. I mean, I would wager, they said they don't want some gym teacher telling their kid, what's, but I'm like, are you prepared? Do you have a curriculum? Do you really know this stuff? Because I wouldn't have at that, point. I mean, I know now, but I wouldn't have necessarily, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, been able to have that conversation effectively. So what do you see as the resistance? And I guess, what is your response?
Well, I mean, to that point of not wanting to have a PE teacher teach your kids sex ed, I mean, I frankly, unless they have had training, I kind of agree, unless you have training in, sexuality education, unless you've been trained on the newest, research with STIs and HIV and AIDS, unless you are educated in, the fact that we should not be separating genders when we do puberty education or sex ed in general. If you are not comfortable teaching about, sexual orientation or gender identity, if you're not comfortable with any of that, you should not be teaching it. So I am going to agree with that.
That's fair.
Right. So, because, well, I don't have to tell you what happens when that, when somebody comes into a class, they're not giving factual information. It's not up to date. They could be othering, kids in the class. And it's just not effective. So what we're looking for is effective sex ed. And in order to do that, you would not, hire, I actually heard this, you can find all this on the internet, or you can, self-teach, but, you can self-teach your thing and anything off the internet, but it doesn't mean you should be doing it. Right?
It doesn't mean it's right.
It doesn't mean it's right. Right. Yeah. And to be comfortable with the random questions that kids, come up with, and be able to sort of like meet that and not sort of show a freak out. And to have a dedicated sexual health professional teaching sex ed, I think would actually ease the concern about what is being taught and having their kids. Part of my program is that I insist upon meeting with the school board to teach them what the actual law is around sex ed, the statistics around the benefit of sex ed, right? Academic buy-in. Yeah. So I want the buy-in from the school board. And then we do a parent info night, right? And we invite parents to come and ask questions. So what I was finding is that the lack of transparency, because schools are not equipped, they're too busy, they're not equipped.
They don't want to have to.
Yeah, they don't know,
because they don't know.
They don't know how to answer the question. So I do a parent info night. I go over the lessons. I talk to them. Overwhelmingly, the parents are grateful, are excited. when I teach at the school.
Probably relieved too, because they don't want to.
Oh, they love it. They're like, can we
charge
do
that.
more? Thank you for doing this. Out of 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, there was only 3 families that opted out. Some opted out for some specific lessons, and one opted out of the entire program. That's not a lot of kids out of a bunch of kids where parents do see the benefit. So I think that the loud voices of anti-sex ed are just louder, but the actual buy-in and the actual knowing how important this is it is way more. So then I do a teacher training so that, we have understanding about what is going to go on in the classroom, right? And then we start teaching, and it has been incredible. There has been 0 negative feedback from families at the school that I teach, nothing but really positive, experiences. I do need to add that sometimes, folks want to say, well, we can't afford it. Actually, California funds sex ed. That is part of the mandate. So
they definitely should. Yeah.
well, they do. It is an actual fact. So I think, having these conversations about what is fact about sex ed and what is myth about sex ed is so critical to just get over that hump of the fear. And then let's move forward with actually having a person who knows how to teach this, who is invested in this accurate information, teaching the curriculum.
Okay, so shifting gears here, and I think what we'll do is a graphic maybe that outlines each of these so that also if people want to get more information, but just briefly, if you can talk about maybe age segments and what would be appropriate for each of those. Some of it obviously is going to be before the school age, and maybe they're not getting sex ed until they're in, 7th grade or something. So, what are those segments?
Where do you start? Right. Mm-hmm. So there is actually a national sex ed standard that was written a couple decades ago, actually. And you can start, like I said, as early as a baby in your family, right? But there's actually curriculum that's available starting in kindergarten and going all the way up to 12th. And what a kindergarten lesson would look like is stories about families. And what that would include is all types of families, right? Adoptive families, queer families, single mom families, single parent families, right? Every family, because we're beginning to teach empathy, right? As we move on, we talk about, anatomy, right? We talk about the full body. And these are all, if your kid is asking you questions, which they will, every kid, well, not every kid, but most kids around 1st, 2nd grade are going to start asking you questions about where do babies come from, right? Yeah. So as a support at school, you could actually have a sexual health professional be sort of teaching these basic concepts, and then you can follow up at home. It's actually an amazing resource for parents and caregivers. It's not just, it's available online. You can go and you can look, and it will sort of break down developmentally, what your kid could be and should be learning about at which age and which grade. So as far as age development, I'm always saying if they're asking the questions, they're ready to know the information. It's just about figuring out, how you're going to deliver that information. Books are amazing. As the kids get older, if you're watching something, you can go, oh, I saw that, person saying no, and then, the person wouldn't accept the no. What do you think about that? Right. So again,
conversation starters. Yeah. Some role playing about.
Right. And so actually let's segue into media, right? So if you're giving your kid an iPhone or whatever, an iPad or a computer, any sort of access to the internet, you have now opened the door up for your kids to see every single thing about porn, anything, unless you have some parent blocks, but no parent block is 100% effective on keeping your kid away from seeing these things. And if they're curious about it and you're not answering these questions and they're not learning it at school, they are going online and they're seeing,
or they're talking to their friends, and
their friends have the phone. You think, oh, well, my kid doesn't have a phone. Well, all their friends have phones, right? And that is opening the door to some really, really damaging information to kids. It's really terrible for their mental health, and it's teaching them, violent sex. It's teaching them, like inaccurate sex.
I've definitely seen that with some of the teens and the young adults doing much more adventurous sexual behavior because they saw it in porn. And this is this generation now. They've grown up with it.
Right.
They see it. They're beyond it physically, but not emotionally and interpersonally. They haven't.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but we're seeing data that is connecting child sibling sexual abuse between siblings connected to access to that pornography. So so that's actually a direct connection. The more that the kids are seeing it, the more they're going to want to try it out. And who is in their home? Their siblings, right? So that is an actual connection. If you are worried about, access to porn having poor mental health implications, actually, you should also be really concerned about how that is leading to, child sexual abuse. So access to that needs to be met with actual factual information.
Yep.
And I work with parents about, how do we have safe internet, exploration with your kid? And I do a whole class on that, on how to have conversations about, predators online, what you're allowing your kids to go on, and actually being really the actual, like, I would say the main message here is the more you are connected with your kid and what they are experiencing in their life, then the better off they are, right? So whether it's
when they've got questions or confusion or
even instigating conversations, right? So some parents think, well, my kid hasn't even asked about it. Well, are you an open, are you open?
That you're open
Are you signaling, or are you like, anytime anything comes up, you shut it down, right? Have you set the foundation for open communication in every other area, right? If they come to you and they feel afraid about something, are you shaming them for feeling afraid of something and telling them to get over it? Well, that small thing that has nothing to do with sex,
gets
now set up. Yep.
Everything.
Yep.
Okay. So just taking you back to the original question of, time periods. So we were talking about first graders, second graders.
Yes.
Take us on through.
Yeah. Okay. So, so third, fourth grade, we should be talking about, sexual abuse. We need to be talking about that, and, what that might look like and how to protect our kids. So we need to be giving them that information. If, the age group of the highest, is 7 through 13. So if we're not talking about it before that, then we are really setting our kids up for, to be in danger and for harm. So we can talk about anatomy, we can talk about friendships. So we really talk a lot about friendships in the earlier ages, because then that sort of like sets up, well, what is a friend to me? And people get in relationships fully for other, they're not even friends, right? You can't even, with a friend, you can have honest conversations, right? And it doesn't translate to a relationship. Like you would never from a friend accept sort of an abusive text, right? So that should be translating to whatever relationship you're in. So third, fourth, we're talking about what's happening with your body. We're talking about friendships, consent, boundaries, different types of families. And we're talking about sexual media literacy. So we're teaching kids, what does digital safety look like? And then, the fourth, fifth, sixth graders focus on puberty, what is happening to their body, because it's a very intense time for their bodies. Again, it is, if you've noticed, it's all the same topics, but in a different sort of format.
With more sort of detail and more
level, right? And so when people think sex ed, oh, they're too young. But I've just explained, it's actually not about sex. It's about relationship building. It's about empathy. It's about protecting our bodies, loving our bodies, information about, all of that. It has nothing to do with intercourse when we're talking about younger kids.
That's an important point. It has nothing to do with intercourse when we're talking about younger kids.
Not at all. It's and that's like the curious thing is when, people hear sex ed, they immediately go to intercourse. And what my message is sexual health is so much larger encompassing.
The other thing, because on that point, I think part of it is the discussion with sex ed that gets pushed back around that age is around gender identity and sexual orientation, and that shouldn't be a topic. But of course, we know that kids are going through puberty. They're feeling their feelings. They're feeling attraction. They're also having, for trans kids, puberty is time of typically dysphoria spiking, right? Because that's when their body's really starting to feel wrong. And so context and compassion, important.
So folks can deny and be against something like teaching gender and sexuality, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it doesn't exist for your child. So, we're kind of looking at actually ages 3 and 4 is around where kids are really exploring their gender, right? And they're like, I am a boy, I am a girl. There's sort of some society pressure on what a boy and a girl is, supposed to look like. But we see kids exploring dress up, right? And for them, there's no gender. It's just fun, right? And then girl and boy toys, right? You're not allowed to play with a girl toy or a boy toy. So why have we gendered clothing? Why have we gendered toys? Why have we gendered hobbies?
Construct.
Yes. So we do need to understand, and I just did an amazing workshop with the Rainbow House up here in Solvang. And it was about the history of LGBTQIA plus folks and sort of the history of Pride. But what people are not understanding and not knowing, because it isn't taught in our schools or anywhere really, is that gender fluidity and sexuality fluidity has existed in time immemorial around the world, historically and always. Queer people have always existed. They always will exist. And you can be against it, but what you're doing is you're harming your child if you're against it. You are your kid's first bully if you are denying this exploration. And sometimes that is what it is. It is. I remember I was like grunge, hippie, I was all kinds of stuff. You were trying to, you're trying things on, but there are queer people who will just tell us up and down, no, I have always known this. I have always known since I was 3, 4, 5 years old who I am. I was born in the wrong body, right? We have medical organizations that are telling us this is real. This exists for these kids, for these people. You cannot like it all you want, but if you're telling your child they're wrong or you're not supporting them, you are harming your kids. And we see the data that if they do not have safe home to express themselves, the rate of suicidal tendencies and actual suicide are through the roof. Half of gender nonconforming kids, as opposed to their heterosexual peers, the data is mind-boggling and horrific. And if you're a parent,
this
or
is also where it starts to, because even if the child isn't gender nonconforming or queer, how they feel about their peers, how they feel about differences in others, this is where the tolerance starts or doesn't start, and the fear grows into something that handicaps us down the road. So
it's the adults, and I just have to say that it's the adults. I mean, I have 2 teenagers, and the teens that I interact with, for the most part, any conversation about gender identity, sexual orientation, any of that, they sometimes know more than I do, right? This is not there's
the nuances and the languaging, and
they are telling us, they are showing us the way. And it's the adults whose voices who don't understand, who don't want to understand, and are coming into these situations with their own past trauma, their own past, toxic masculinity, all of that. And it's hurting our kids. So that is really, you asked me at the beginning of our interview, like, why did I get into this? It's because I care about kids. I care about our youth. I want them to thrive, live joyous lives, no matter who they are. And the way that I see that I can do that is through sexual health, for parents and in schools, and just supporting the kids and who they are. They know who they are. They just need to feel loved and accepted and have accurate information.
Yeah. And the information is key. And that part, I mean, I love Emily Nagoski. I just so appreciate the way that she has presented so much of this information, made it really digestible and easy to then disseminate. It's her writing has been really helpful, and I definitely give it to female clients all the time. But I love that you're starting at this young age where you're having a difference with these kids, and that you're giving them access to information and to language, and to opening a conversation that they might not participate in now, but they at least are aware is available.
It is available. The information is available out there. It's available with me. It's just about what is important to us. What are we wanting to be invested in? And I think if we can sort of shift to the not having shame around sexuality, but having curiosity about sexuality.
Yeah.
That's a huge shift.
I love that. And curiosity is everything in the erotic space and the sexual space, but erotic space certainly is. There's a rigidity that happens, and people get afraid, or they get embarrassed, or they get, anxious. And it's like, curiosity is the way out.
And we do not allow children to have curiosity at some age. We just shut it down. And it's because we have not made peace with ourselves. We cannot support kids in their curiosity, in their exploration, in their self-love, if we are being activated and triggered, right? If you see your kid masturbating and you were taught shame around that, or you don't even understand what that is, you're going to immediately shame them. You're not going to be able to talk with them about what it is. It's a totally natural part of growing up, or, being a sexual being. Here are the appropriate places to do it. Here are the places we don't do it, right? And that's valid. We can't just let our kids just do it, at the grocery store. That's not appropriate and unsafe, right? But I really want parents and adults and caregivers, educators to really admit, this is my stuff that is keeping me from being able to have these conversations. Kids are in perfection. There are no broken children. There just isn't. There's no problem kids, no broken kids, until we put all that stuff on them. There's no shame in who they are. They just run around, curious, wanting to know these things. And we're the ones that, veer them off course. And then as adults, we wonder, oh my gosh, am I feeling shame? Why? Right. Why can't I say no? Why can't I receive no? Why do I not understand that I have 3 holes? Right?
Exactly.
Right. Why do I not know that the clitoris is, for pleasure? Right.
It exists and where
exists. Right. We talk so much about, masturbation with a penis, but rarely do you hear about masturbation, with a clitoris. And so, these are all just accepting our own limitations, shame, past trauma, all of that, and making peace with that, so that we don't continue this, intergenerational lack of information, which breeds shame and fear.
Hallelujah. Well, thank you. I love this conversation, and I so appreciate the work you are doing. If you want to find Trish, she is at opendoorssupport.com. and on Instagram at Open Doors Supported.
Supported, yes.
So please reach out to her. She is available for your school, especially if you're in California, to come and do some programs. So thank you again, and let's continue this conversation, and we'll definitely include some resources in the show notes.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for this opportunity, Jen. I really appreciate it.
Great.